Before we begin, take a moment to breathe. If these reflections speak to something silent inside you, subscribe so you don't lose the path back here. Every like, every comment helps this message find those who are still searching in the dark. Now, let's begin. Jung's most dangerous realization was never merely about recovery. It was about what happens to the empath after enduring narcissistic destruction. He found that such an encounter either annihilates sensitivity altogether or forges a consciousness unlike anything previously documented. Through decades of clinical observation, he described patients whose empathy, once their greatest gift, had been turned against them, used as a weapon by narcissistic personalities who fed upon their light. And yet, among the survivors, Jung discovered a strange phenomenon. Those who emerged from the devastation were no longer the same beings who had entered it. They had become something psychologically unprecedented, what he called sovereign empaths, individuals capable of profound feeling yet immune to manipulation. Jung regarded this transformation as perilous because those who reached it often appeared unrecognizable to others. Their presence carried an air of calm that unsettled the unconscious minds around them. He wrote that they had walked through the inferno of human nature and returned tempered, not broken. One such case, recorded in 1928, involved a patient Jung referred to as M, a 34-year-old woman whose life had been defined by relationships with destructive, self-absorbed partners. When she first arrived, her sense of self was so eroded that she mirrored everyone she met, absorbing their emotions until her own identity dissolved. Jung called her state psychic liquefaction, the boundaries between self and other melted by excessive empathy. But over 2 years, something remarkable occurred. M did not simply heal, she transmuted. Through the process Jung termed shadow integration, she developed conscious permeability, the ability to feel deeply yet decide what to take in and what to release. In his private notes he wrote, "She perceives deceit before a word is spoken. Compassion remains, yet she cannot be deceived by sentiment." It was, in his words, empathy under command. Those who once depended on her caretaking accused her of becoming cold. Friends said she had changed. Jung disagreed. He noted her eyes no longer seek validation, they witness. To him, this was proof of the highest psychic adaptation. Narcissistic abuse, he concluded, acts as an alchemical crucible. It either consumes the empath entirely or refines them into psychological gold. The mechanism behind this evolution is forced individuation, the confrontation with one's own shadow through another's cruelty. The narcissist, acting unconsciously, becomes a mirror that exposes everything the empath denies about themselves. Control disguised as kindness, pride masked as humility, the desire to heal as the will to dominate pain. In this collision, Jung observed what he called the triple death of empathy, the death of innocence, of idealized love, and of the need for external affirmation. Only those who endure all three without closing their hearts can pass into the final stage. From these ashes emerges integrated empathy, the ability to feel without rescuing, to perceive without absorbing, to love without erasure. Jung saw in such individuals a serenity that resembled enlightenment, but had been achieved through suffering rather than meditation. Their nervous systems were calm, their perception precise. They did not repress emotion. They filtered it consciously. He compared this to monks who reached detachment through discipline, except the sovereign empath reached it through agony. The abuser, he wrote, serves as an unwitting initiator, compelling the soul to forge new psychological musculature. Yet this awakening carried an immense cost: social exile. Those who evolve beyond collective unconsciousness find it difficult to dwell within it. They discern falsity in tone, motive in gesture, and projection in every accusation. Conversation becomes theater they can no longer perform in. Jung called this the consciousness gap, the distance between those who have integrated their darkness and those still enslaved by it. M herself described the experience in words Jung later quoted, "I now see through every mask and I grieve for what I see." Her clarity isolated her. Family and friends withdrew, uneasy before her calm transparency. Jung called this condition the prophet's solitude, being rejected not for error but for vision. "They have eaten of the tree of knowledge," he wrote, "and innocence cannot be restored." Society senses the awakened empath instinctively and responds with fear. The unconscious protects its illusions. Jung noted that even other therapists found these individuals unsettling, for they mirrored back the unexamined fragments of every psyche they encountered. He classified 4 distinct trajectories that empaths follow after enduring narcissistic abuse, only one of which leads to psychological sovereignty. Type 1, the dissolved empath, those who never recover their identity, existing as emotional ghosts who live through others' moods. Type 2, the armored empath, survivors who wall themselves off completely, mistaking numbness for peace. Type 3, the wounded healer, those who turn pain into mission but still unconsciously need to rescue others to feel valuable. And Type 4, the sovereign empath, the final metamorphosis, wherein empathy fuses with consciousness itself. Jung described them as vessels capable of containing the totality of human emotion without corruption. They could witness cruelty and remain compassionate, enforce limits without guilt, and perceive darkness without becoming dark. They were, as he put it, hearts made wise by fire. Yet Jung warned that the higher the evolution, the greater the isolation. Sovereign empaths often lived in what he termed the desert of understanding, a psychological landscape too wide for ordinary companionship. They have outgrown the tribe, he wrote, but have not yet found their kin. Many reported sensing manipulation in moments others found harmless, seeing collective delusion before it collapsed, and recognizing destiny and coincidence. He called this the burden of sight. To perceive everything, he explained, is to lose the comfort of illusion. What once provided belonging now feels suffocating, for authenticity becomes the only oxygen left. Jung noted that the sovereign empath's greatest trial was not surviving cruelty, but enduring clarity. When one sees too much, illusion becomes unbearable. These individuals reported fatigue not of the body, but of perception itself, a weight he termed archetypal exhaustion. They could predict betrayals before they happened, sense the falsity of words before they were spoken, and read the emotional temperature of a room as precisely as a physician reads a pulse. Such awareness came with responsibility few could shoulder. They often confessed to Jung that knowledge felt like a curse. For once the pattern behind human behavior is seen, it cannot be unseen. They live with divine eyesight, he wrote, and such vision isolates as surely as blindness. He observed 3 principal burdens that follow this evolution. The first was the weight of insight. They possessed answers others rejected. Their clarity, when voiced, was often perceived as arrogance. This became what Jung called the Cassandra dilemma, truth seen too early to be believed. The second burden was authenticity itself. They could no longer participate in pretense. Social games felt poisonous. Jung described it as having mastered the theater of life, but losing the appetite for performance. The third was the loss of belonging. Having integrated their shadow, they were no longer magnetized by unconscious people, yet neither could they return to the innocence of ignorance. They stand, Jung wrote, at the border between worlds, exiles of the unconscious and pioneers of the real. He warned of a final danger, archetypal possession. Some evolved empaths, intoxicated by their new perception, began identifying entirely with the healer or savior archetype. In doing so, they became trapped once again, this time by light instead of darkness. Jung cautioned that the moment one imagines oneself beyond shadow, the shadow has already taken hold. To prevent this inflation, he developed a method he called the shadow integration protocol. an alchemy of psyche designed to transform suffering into discernment. Stage 1. Shadow recognition. The empath must acknowledge the same traits they despise in the narcissist: manipulation, control, vanity, deceit. Integration begins when projection ends. Goodness without awareness becomes moral superiority, which is itself a shadow. Stage 2. Projection recall. Here the empath retrieves the aspects of self they had exiled into others, realizing that what they hated outside lived quietly within. The narcissist's grandiosity mirrors their own repressed need to be seen. The manipulator's control echoes their hidden fear of chaos. Stage 3. Boundary alchemy. This is not about walls but conscious permeability, learning to feel without absorption, to listen without loss. Empathy becomes a deliberate act, not a reflex. Stage 4. Archetypal alignment. The survivor accepts their role as a wounded healer, yet refuses to worship their pain. Suffering becomes raw material for awareness, not identity. Jung prescribed practical rituals for these stages: daily shadow dialogues with the parts of self they avoided, emotional fasting, periods of deliberate non-absorption, and meditative reflection upon recurring life symbols. The goal, he wrote, is not recovery, but transfiguration. The chrysalis cannot crawl again. He found parallels between this psychic alchemy and the stages of individuation outlined in his greater work. Each metamorphosis represented a death followed by a deeper incarnation of selfhood. He identified 5 metamorphic phases marking the empath's journey from dissolution to sovereignty. First, dissolution, the collapse of identity during active abuse, which feels like death, but is actually ego decomposition. Second, descent, the confrontation with the underworld of one's own psyche, where despair, rage, and longing are faced without avoidance. Third, integration, the deliberate incorporation of shadow aspects into conscious life. Anger becomes assertion, selfishness becomes self-respect. Fourth, emergence, sensitivity returns, purified of compulsion. One can sense deceit without reacting, love without losing center. Fifth, sovereignty, the realization of archetypal awareness itself, where personal wounds dissolve into collective understanding. Each metamorphosis, Jung estimated, could span months or years depending on the individual's courage to remain conscious amid chaos. He warned that avoiding any stage would cause regression or psychological inflation. For those who persisted, the reward was what he termed emotional equanimity, serenity unbreakable by projection or praise. These individuals became what he called the bridge generation, linking the personal psyche to the collective evolution of humanity. Jung mapped recurring pitfalls that sabotage transformation. The first, spiritual vanity. Believing one's awakening proves superiority. To think oneself purified, he noted, is to be possessed anew. The second, healing addiction. The endless search for new cures instead of living the truth already found. He called this therapeutic consumerism. The third, isolation as armor. Mistaking withdrawal for wisdom, sovereignty engages with life rather than escaping it. The fourth, revenge as justice, using new insight to punish those who once caused pain. Mature empathy transmutes vengeance into understanding. To maintain balance, Jung recommended daily shadow audits, quiet self-inquiry into whether one's motives sprang from love or defense, clarity or control. In his later lectures, he described sovereign empaths as the prototypes of future consciousness. They are living laboratories, he said, for the next form of human psyche, where sensitivity no longer implies vulnerability. They feel the full range of emotion without drowning in it. They experience the world not through reaction but recognition. Such beings, Jung believed, would become essential as humanity's psychological complexity increased. Without them, society would collapse under the weight of its own projections. He saw in them the early signs of collective individuation, consciousness learning to perceive itself. As Jung's understanding deepened, He began to view these individuals not as anomalies but as heralds of psychological evolution. He wrote that sovereign empaths carry the future pattern of human consciousness within their nervous systems. Their transformation was not a personal triumph but a collective necessity, the psyche attempting to adapt to an increasingly fragmented world. Through them, he saw what he called the reconciliation of opposites: emotion fused with reason, compassion fused with discernment, sensitivity merged with strength. In such souls, duality becomes dialogue. Their existence proves that feeling and clarity can coexist without conflict. Jung's journals describe a paradox at the heart of their lives. Though they often live in silence and solitude, they are not disconnected. They vibrate in resonance with the collective unconscious itself. When humanity suffers, they feel the tremor. When truth emerges somewhere in the world, they sense relief. Their solitude, Jung wrote, is the solitude of mountain summits, alone, yet touching the sky. He believed that the loneliness they experience is not exile but assignment. They are stationed at the edge of awareness, guardians between shadow and light. Yet the same insight that grants them freedom can also wound them. Many sovereign empaths, Jung observed, struggle with the impossibility of being fully known. They move among others as mirrors, reflecting what people avoid within themselves. Some are revered, others rejected. He called this the prophet's burden, to speak truth through presence rather than persuasion. Their calm exposes dissonance. Their silence disturbs the dishonest. They are, he wrote, the conscience of the collective made flesh. To ease this burden, Jung urged such individuals to seek relationships built not on dependency but resonance. He described recognition signals that reveal another awakened psyche: ease in silence, humor in paradox, comfort with contradiction, and the absence of defense when truth appears. In such company, the sovereign empath experiences rest, the rare sense of being met rather than mirrored. Jung named this state psychological communion, the meeting of two differentiated consciousnesses that neither devour nor distort one another. He advised them to use their evolved sensitivity in service to the collective rather than retreat from it. The purpose of enlightenment, he wrote, is not escape, but participation without absorption. Teaching, creating, healing, or even silent presence could transmit integration into the wider field of human awareness. He called this archetypal service, the natural expression of wisdom once suffering has been transmuted into light. Some would become analysts or artists, others quiet guides within ordinary life. Their task was not to preach awakening, but to embody it, to live as evidence that transformation is possible. Still, Jung did not romanticize their condition. He recognized that even the most evolved consciousness remains vulnerable to despair when isolated too long. To carry fire in a world of damp wood, he warned, is a lonely labor. He encouraged sovereign empaths to maintain creative outlets, music, writing, movement, as bridges between inner and outer life. Creativity, he said, was the psyche's way of releasing pressure from insight too vast for speech. Through art, the ineffable finds rhythm and form. Jung concluded that the sovereign empath's journey mirrors the myth of alchemy: base matter, pain, humiliation, betrayal, heated by suffering until it becomes gold. The trauma that was meant to destroy them, he wrote, becomes the very forge that reveals their essence. He believed this pattern could one day serve as a universal map for the human condition, to meet darkness consciously and emerge illumined. Each empath who completes this passage contributes not only to personal healing, but to the evolution of the species. In his final reflections, Jung called these individuals bridges of consciousness. They stand between the personal and the transpersonal, mediating the emergence of a more integrated humanity. Their empathy is no longer reaction, but recognition, no longer sacrifice, but sovereignty. They no longer ask how to protect their light. They understand the light protects itself when anchored in awareness. Power without compassion is tyranny, he wrote, but compassion without power is martyrdom. The union of the two births wisdom. He observed that sovereign empaths carry a new emotional architecture, one that can endure paradox without fracture. They embody the paradoxical truth that to love deeply, one must first stand alone. Their strength lies in their softness, their authority in their stillness. These are the architects of a new compassion, Jung wrote, for theirs is a love no longer bound to approval or fear. He saw in them the prototype of a conscious humanity, souls who do not flee the shadow but include it, who do not dissolve into emotion but illuminate it from within. Jung's last entry on this phenomenon reads like scripture. The narcissist, unaware, becomes the dark priest of initiation. Through cruelty, they forge the very consciousness that will one day redeem them. He understood that suffering, when met with awareness, becomes revelation. The empath who survives such initiation does not return to innocence. They return with insight. Their pain becomes language. Their scars become instructions for others lost in the same maze. They are living testaments that consciousness can survive its own destruction. To those who recognize themselves in this path, Jung would offer neither comfort nor warning but acknowledgement. You are not broken, he would say. You are becoming. The journey you walk is not punishment, but participation in humanity's unfolding. Each betrayal, each silence, each moment of isolation refines the lens through which the soul perceives itself. What feels like exile is initiation. What feels like loss is liberation from illusion. Guard your awareness, he would counsel. Do not reveal your depth to those who mistake stillness for emptiness. Let silence become your fortress, and perception your compass. Speak when speech serves consciousness. Be silent when silence preserves it. You are not here to fit within the world as it stands, but to reveal what the world might become when awareness walks through it. And so the circle closes. The empath, once shattered by shadow, becomes its interpreter. Their eyes no longer seek safety. They see. Their heart no longer bleeds. It beats with purpose. Jung called this the ultimate individuation, the transformation of wound into wisdom, of empathy into sovereignty. From the ruins of manipulation rises the architect of consciousness itself. If these words echo your experience, whisper them into your being. I am becoming sovereign. Your transformation is not merely personal. It is the universe remembering itself through you. The fire that once consumed you now illuminates your path. Walk gently. Carry light wisely. And know, beyond all doubt, that your existence is proof that consciousness, even through agony, always finds a way to evolve. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to breathe and remember that awareness grows when it's shared. Subscribe so you don't lose your way when the next reflection arrives. Leave a like. It helps this message reach others who need to hear it but don't yet know why. And share your thoughts below, because every comment here becomes a spark. One awakened mind helping another remember. Together, we move beyond the dark.